Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar sponsored by Pisano. Just a sound check. Can everyone hear me? Hi, Ying and Friska. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, all clear.
Hello.
Okay. Oh, wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. So, welcome to this afternoon, and I really enjoyed this lunch that I had just now, and I hope you guys too. Now, we have a very two special guests this afternoon with us, which is Friska and Being. Let me just give a quick introduction, and I'm not going to do a lot of justice, by the way, in having explained their background. So I would really love Friska and Being themselves later on to further expand on what I've got to introduce to you. So Being, she's from Lazada. She leads the voice of customer team in Lazada Singapore, overseeing data and insights, customers research, and advocacy practices within the customer experience team in Singapore. Her interest lies in building customer empathy and understanding the effect of cultural transformation to serve customers better. We have Friska Wirya. She's based in Sydney right now. She heads up the change management at Newcrest Mining, the largest gold miner on the ASX, leading its digital transformation changes to achieve significant financial and innovation outcomes. Winning the 2018 METS Ignited Collaboration Award, the SAP Innovation Award, and several other innovation rankings. Prior to this, Friska was the global change lead at engineering giant Worley, overseeing technology, process, and system changes across 55 offices. Welcome, both ladies. Now, we're going to have an interesting topic about CX, which is very close to my heart and to everyone's here, because CX is fundamentally drives, in my opinion, drives everything from strategy to execution, and particularly about P&L, which is really at the heart of every businesses. So before I dive in a bit deeper into how the trends of CX and also how CX play a much more important role in today's businesses, I'd like to just hand over for a quick further introduction by both of them first. Maybe starting with Friska. Friska, could you please expand on the introduction that I've done, if I've not done enough justice?
You did a very good job. But sure, thank you, Francis. So I influence and sustain changes in an organization, whatever that may be. It could be digital, it could be structural, it could be cultural, it could be systemic. And I've been doing that for nearly a decade for some of the biggest names in mining, engineering, higher ed, and technology. As Francis said, I spent 2 years at a very large gold miner driving adoption of new and emerging technology, specifically at site operations. And after that, I consulted to Australia's answer to Harvard, the University of Melbourne, supporting its COVID-19 response, the shift to fully remote working, studying, learning, teaching. And I'm an independent consultant. I also coach, mentor, and train on anything related to change, communication, and sponsorship.
Thank you, Friska. Wonderful. And definitely change management is a large piece that we want to discuss, because transforming CX across the organization is a very big change, both from the mindset, from strategy to execution. Thank you so much, Friska. Ying.
Yes, thank you, Francis. And hello, everybody. I'm I'm currently at Lazada Singapore, where I lead the voice of customer practice. So Francis summarized that really well. Prior to this, I was leading strategy for customer experience, and my background is actually in marketing. So I've been practicing CRM for quite a number of years. And very excited about topics of customer experience and human-centered design, and I'm sure we'll cover some of that today.
All right, thank you so much, Being. Now, I have a couple of questions that we have prepared, and then we would like to have both experts to provide their point of view. And at the end of the discussion by the panel, we'll be opening up questions to the floor. And feel free to please type into the messages, and you can send your questions across. We would love to take that. Now, first and foremost, my first question will be regarding what are your observations, particularly on the CX front, in the area of strategy and execution in the last decade, that you deem that are successful, and what are some of those that you think could be potentially lagging? Maybe we can start with Friska this time round.
I think some standouts in the CX transformation space would be Apple, Zappos, and Uber, because the digital experience combined with the face-to-face experience, it's often very, very seamless. And they've been able to overcome a few of the common issues that really hamper true CX transformation. So the biggest blunders that I've noticed would be too many cooks in the kitchen. Like, for example, for a big project for CX optimization, say you want to redo a company's website, but the minute that CX efforts touch on this, there's a deluge of stakeholders from all different functions, from marketing to sales to development. They all want to get their opinions and their 2 cents in. Now, if everyone has their say, then the risk is you'll be diluting the experience and communicating very different things at each step. So the result is a very schizophrenic, haphazard message where the website, the app, the landing page, the retargeting ads, they all say very different things. So a way to get around that is to get in very early. Like any good change management project, the earlier you communicate, the better. Get that stakeholder input and ensure that approvals are only limited to a few people. Otherwise, the entire process will get bottlenecked and you just cannot please everybody. And I agree with Francis that this is really the time for CX to come to the fore, because we've realized the importance of it due to COVID, when we cannot physically go to businesses and all we have is digital CX to cement our perception of our favorite brands. But because it's still relatively new, same with change management, it's still not a very understood discipline, and therefore it suffers from a legitimacy problem. The ROI is not always very easy to prove because it relies on non-financial metrics, and also executives don't see the value of it yet. They don't understand how putting in more effort into UX design or reducing the number of customer tickets, they don't understand how that relates to revenues and profits, and the same with change management. So I think the good brands out there, they've learned to prioritize and champion all CX efforts as a way to foster retention. So they educate the executives and they really articulate how even small changes in CX can drive retention and revenue up. And I think the next step for that would be EX, employee experience. I mean, organizations spend a lot of time and money on talent acquisition and attraction, and only a fraction of that on talent retention. So unhappy employees leave and the vicious cycle of recruiting starts all over again. It's the exactly same thing with CX. It costs a lot more to get new customers than it does to keep the current ones happy.
Thank you, Friska. Being, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think very in line with that, right? I think agree that CX is a pretty new field, and when I first started my career as well, like CX was kind of a catch-all term, right? You could use CX to describe anything from advertising to marketing to UX design to even customer service. But what I've seen in the last few years is that the definition or the maturity has gotten a lot better. I think CX is emerging as kind of a control tower function in some of the organizations that I've seen. And I think where CX has been successful is putting the customer at the heart of whatever the organizations do, even if it's haphazard at the start, right? And different people have different definitions of who a customer is and what the customer actually is trying to achieve. At least there's this human-centered design or this view of who the customer is and who we're supposed to be serving. I think so in terms of moving forward for the challenges, and as Friska rightly pointed out, there's so many people involved, and I think the stakeholder management becomes very important. And one of the challenges that I foresee is how do we create a common language to unite the employees, the staff, the team around solving a common problem so that the whole organization is aligned and pushing towards the same goal.
Yeah, both of you touched on a very interesting common point about having too many cooks in one place. So we have observed some organizations, particularly some industry, that have very dedicated customer experience department, whereas some companies or industry are a little bit more lagging behind. What are your observations in terms of do you think, is there any industry that stands out to you? They are a bit more forefront and more advanced in the CX scene.
Oh, difficult question. And I think that heralds back to some of the readings that I've done on CX. Right? I remember one of the quotes from one of the leading CX expert was that she was interviewing someone from Amazon, and she asked, "So who owns CX in your organization?" And the executive was like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you mean?" And it took a time for that question to really land when it's actually owned by everyone in the organization. I think that's kind of the peak or the pinnacle of the cultural aspect of it. If you know it's owned by the whole organization and everyone kind of knows their part of what they're playing. But then it then needs to be again recalibrated once in a while, right? Because it can go off track sometimes. That being said, with a dedicated CX team, like in the role that I am, what that does is then it serves as a coordinator. It serves as you know, a centralized area to get in all the inputs from the function. So if there's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? I would say the analogy could be like CX can be then the executive chef, like saying, okay, these are how many projects we're working on. Actually, there are alignments here and there. So I think we serve a bit more of a coordinating function in that sense. But again, to each organization, depending on the maturity of the practice and the maturity of the customer base as well.
Friska, do you have a comment on this?
My observation would be Apple as a standout brand, where it seems like everybody knows what CX is, how important it is, and they really live and breathe it, right from the call center to dropping into a store to the timeliness and even down to the words of their emails. You can tell that excellence and dedication to customers is one of their core values, and it just shines through.
Yeah, I agree that it's customer centricity is key. Depending, being as a good point, depending on the maturity of the organization, the more mature they are, the having everybody responsible for CX, which is the right thing to do, but it can also be confusing, where then nobody is really responsible. Everybody is responsible, become nobody really responsible. So it depends on the maturity of the organization. Now, one very famous story, or we often heard about Amazon, right? Like right from the start of their formation, at every meeting, internal meeting that they always have an empty chair. Now the empty chair is so they have internal meeting, discuss about everything. Then they will then look at the chair. What would the customer think? What would this impact the customer? How would the customer respond to what we want to change and things like that? I think it's a very good very conscious effort to make sure that every meeting organization work towards that. Because I in fact just told someone the other day that whatever task we do can or you or your guys underneath you are doing in that particular task or particular hour, if you can relay that task all the way down several value chain to what the impact is on the customer, then you know why you're doing that. And then there's the reason why you do that. And then there's a high efficiency and reason behind why you do that. Often this would translate to more passion, higher productivity, more efficiency, and maybe a combination of all. But I find that often this has maybe potentially lost its way in really linking whatever task the employee does at every event or hour, linking to the outcome of the customer. So that I think potentially could be the area of training, perhaps a mindset change that we see.
Yeah.
And in terms of the question I asked, I also have a view that the hospitality and the financial sectors tend to have a more focused customer experience department or people that you like, which is good. And Bing has a good point. They serve as a centralized coordinator role, driving, pulling, because CX is across silos. All organization, everyone has a part to play, right? So if you don't have someone driving CX, pulling all this together, and then you often lies on the lap of several other people like the COO, the CTO, and you name it, the list goes on. But it becomes then who's doing what, really? So that presents a challenge itself. On the point of the challenges here, I'd like to hear what you have observed in your day-to-day, especially whether it's Lazada or outside, or what you have heard, maybe stuff with Ying. What are the challenges, and if you have any examples that you can think about that highlighted some of the challenges and maybe potentially how you overcome those challenges?
in CX? Well, Francis, like you said, right, some of the leaders are very much in hospitality, in finance, in retail, where there's quite a lot of face-to-face interaction with your end customer. Being a pure play e-commerce, we don't have that interaction with the customer, right? So I think that part gets quite challenging on the one hand in terms of building empathy across the organization. Like, if I can't see my customers, who am I actually serving? On the other hand, where we have the benefit of is quite a lot of data. So what we can do actually then is to look into the data and see where the challenges that face our customers are. And I think one of the key tools that we have used quite successfully, I would say, is a customer journey mapping. So whether it's through your buying journey as an end customer on Lazada or as a seller, a small business owner, we kind of know according to which stage in your customer journey, there are certain friction points. And we have defined that quite a bit. And one of the good things about being very data centric is that what gets measured gets managed. So I can give an example where we know a friction point for a lot of online commerce is returns, right? Because returns means you either got a product you don't like, it doesn't fit you, or unfortunately it's broken. So we know that is a negative experience for our customers. So what we try to optimize around that is, one, how do we even first of all reduce the number of returns requests that we get? And in the event that there is a return, how do we then measure specific metrics across it? Like how long does it take for a return to be successfully processed and refunded? How easy is it for the customer by using customer effort scores around those kind of touch points? So yeah, I would say that that's how I currently address some of these challenges around customer experience.
Thanks, Ying. In fact, I remember my own instances when I did need to do a return, not managing the platform for now. It was a bit painful tracking them. But on the another platform that I use, absolutely wonderful feeling where I get fully updated so frequently.
Right.
Sometimes it's a bit too often, but I like that because I won't then go into a black box where my box is. It's not in the black box, it's somewhere, and I know the journey. That's wonderful. Friska,
absolutely,
how about you?
Right. And I think, sorry, just to add on a little bit to that, right?
Sure.
How do we then turn that negative experience into a recovery and a positive one? So you're probably going to share that really great experience on the second platform with your friends and say that, hey, it went wrong, but they managed to do something really good for me. So yeah, I think that's the golden, the holy grail.
I'm going to carry on from the conversation that we've been having about silos, and especially silos, and not just that, but too little investment in CX. So communication is obviously very important to shaping CX, and also it's very important to the increasing the adoption of a change. But many large organizations, they still create, manage, monitor customer communication in silos. So for example, operations often send you communications about billing, marketing does the promotional stuff and direct mail, and then your client relationship managers could do the services. So aligning these groups is essential if we want to have an exceptional customer experience. And this is relevant to how employee experience too. I remember receiving letters from HR and they were so cold and devoid of any warmth, I'd swear R2-D2 from Star Wars had more personality, you know? And this is prevalent across so many organizations, across sectors, across industries, and across geographies as well. So, and I think a big part, again, why there is too little investment in CX. So I was reading a study the other day and it said that CX was hard to get investment for because 48% of executives surveyed cited lack of understanding and sponsorship as being a significant issue. So that's nearly half. So that indicates to me that it's not that companies don't want to move forward with the CX strategy. They just don't know how. They just don't know what good looks like. So that's a barrier for sure.
Thank you, Friska. In fact, exactly to the point of what doesn't get measured is often not understood. And I remember I have a boss, he has this very famous sentence. He says, whatever does not get measured does not exist. Oh, wow, it stays with me after 2 decades. So we're going to come to measurement about CX the later part of the discussion. I'd like to swing to the point of question on trends, CX trends. I'd like to hear your views. What are the trends that you have observed more recently, and perhaps potentially more importantly, that you've seen among the organizations that you have worked with? Who would like to Skype?
Oh, I'll go. I'd say
Sure.
live chat. So live chat hasn't always been a priority for many e-commerce brands, but now 71% of global brands have this functionality. They have bots or dedicated customer service teams for their social media channels and customer queries. And it's impressive to know that 64% of brands are responding to a query within 60 seconds. That is insane. So what does this mean? There's been a great shift. I think more and more brands are realizing the importance of being responsive and always on to help their customers, right? Whether it's a social media channel, whether it's live chat, whether it's a website, it's important to facilitate two-way conversations, not monologues, to deliver the best customer service. And this philosophy is tried and true in change management arena as well. You want to open up a dialogue, not a diatribe. And I think more and more brands are doing this. And a carry on from that is the callback feature and stated waiting times. I feel this is rising in prominence. For example, within Australia here, the borders kept on opening and shutting, and I had to reorganize quite a few flights, and I could organize callbacks from Qantas instead of waiting on hold for God knows when. Now, that's a company that's got it right. And contrast this with Telstra, which is a telecommunications company. I got a letter in the mail, snail mail, saying that my current monthly subscription would nearly double. The fee would more than double. But guess what? They didn't tell me why. I had no idea why. And it said the only way to cancel the subscription is to call them. And so I was on hold, I kid you not, for 1.5 hours. Big blunder. The CX, what not
You were
to
very
do.
patient, Friska.
Well, I didn't want to be slugged $200. I was like, come on. Long story short, would I ever return there? No. Have I told everyone else about my negative experience? Yes. So those are the top two trends for me: the live chat, the responsiveness, the two-way dialogue, and the giving people what they need to know. So telling them how long they'll be on hold and then accommodating their schedule. So being more empathetic to the busy lifestyles of today.
Wow, that's a hard act to follow, Friska. I love those two trends, and I would say yes, agree. But I guess to add on to that, right, in terms of the communications part of it, like I think one of the key things that I've been seeing is more proactive communications rather than reactive communication. So, for example, if we know the borders are going to close, we're going to tell customers who are affected by parcels coming from overseas before they even place their order, hey, there might be a delay. So letting customers see what's going to happen before it actually happens. I would say that that communication trend is increasing, and I hope to see more of that, and really to guide customers to make better decisions first before they go into that hole of having to pay double on their subscription fee, right? But if I were to answer it in a different way, coming from the organizational perspective in terms of trends, I'm actually seeing in terms of CX a lot more adoption of design thinking types of methodologies in order to create customer experience initiatives. And I think that's really great because that kind of empathy-based, cross-functional ways of working to the point of helping to improve the employee experience and making sure that people get heard earlier on. I think that's a great tool to be using in order to develop for the end customer, and also to get people's views in place before we go live with anything. So, for example, some of the things that we've done in the past is a cross-departmental committee around it, and then what happens is that if we involve everyone at the start, it can't be like just marketing or design saying, oh yes, we need to build this feature, and when you get down to technology, if they've not been involved at the start, they'll be like, but I don't have any bandwidth in my roadmap to do it. Why are you suddenly saying that this is happening? So I think that as a tool organizationally to manage employee experience, and then also to have an impact on customer experience, is a big trend I've noticed.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, I agree with both of you. And I have a story to tell that that points towards the two trends that I observe. The first is speed, and the second is visibility. Visibility, understanding what things is happening as from the customer front, particularly when you are asking a question, you need a service. Where are we now? Where am I? Where is my product? So recently, and this story is about a government agency that typically I think we all have an opinion or a perception that the government agencies tend to be a bit slower, a bit of inverted commas. But I'm going to shed some good light about that. So I had two incidents recently, a very minor accident, just bump into someone's car, car to car. So, nowadays you can just file a report online. Nothing serious, it's just a little dot. And from the moment I press send, my police report, which just took just 5 minutes just to file, when I click send, within 3 minutes, I got a call. And you know what? On the other end of the line is the police inspector. Say that we received your police report, and how can I help? And there was some advice, some next steps. And this happened twice in a month for another small little incident. And I was like, oh my God, this is really, really interesting. I mean, the SLA is just so high that a lot of commercial entities cannot even catch up. I didn't even expect 5 minutes. I would be happy if they come back to me in the past a week, 2 weeks, or 3 days. I'll be very impressed. But it's just, we're talking about minutes here. So so we can see that even an agency, a bureaucratic agency, can make some of these things right, getting back to you quickly, which is speed. And then he checked on me a week later. So how was it? So I think fantastic. I think the kind of visibility that I'm getting on the other end as a user, customers, that leaves me a good story to tell.
I love that, and I think I have something to add, right, to Friska's earlier point of how do we measure the impact on the organization, right? If you think of it from the police point of view, they're saving time, driving out to the scene, taking photos. It's probably another 20 minutes. You have patrol, you have parking, you have traffic. It frees up so much time for other productive tasks on their end. So I think this is a great win-win example.
Yes, wonderful. Now, since we move on to measurement, and earlier on we touched on, if it doesn't get measured, that leaves a lot of skepticism, especially among the leadership when it comes to investment. So then now, on the topic of measurement, what do you think, and you can give me examples as well to share with the rest of us, what do you think is good to be measured and how it is? And perhaps you can cite one example. Anyone, feel free to go.
I can start first. So in our organization, and I think across many organizations, NPS is one of the key things that people do measure for CX. While that is a big measurement, right? And again, the question is who owns NPS? Probably another $1 million question to ask a lot of organizations. What I've seen is that there is definitely there's a lot of contributing factors in order to roll up into that one NPS. And one of the key things that I'm trying to do this year also is how do we get the understanding of NPS higher in the whole organization, so everybody has a buy-in to want to try and raise this bar together. There is another measurement that I recently heard of, which is ROX. And to be frank, it's a very new topic. We'd love to hear if Friska or Francis, have heard of this measurement and how you guys are using that.
Hi, Friska. You can go next.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
I echo being. NPS is definitely a most common one. Now, what I usually measure is the CX transformation itself. And there's a few different metrics you can choose: individual, departmental, or organization-wide. And it's good to have a combination of all three, so you get a holistic snapshot of how your transformation is performing. It could be, the number of calls. It could be the customer feedback on those calls. It could be stakeholder effectiveness. It could be leadership satisfaction with the CX process. So it depends, in my opinion, it depends on the sector and the industry and what's relevant for that company. But the main point is to make sure that you have a wide variety and a combination of leading and lagging indicators as well.
Yeah, so my views and observations are as follow. While there are a lot of traditional measurements like the NPS and even revenues, some of these measurements, but I think uh, what measurements are more effective are those that could be translated across all the departments and silos, and if they are all able to be measured on the same thing. Because if you only have half the organization measured on CX related ROIs, then you only have roughly half of the organization really working towards that goal. So I often look at and derive goals that is pertinent and customized to that organization, that all departments has a role to play in achieving the customer satisfaction. So then breaking that down, that measurement would then be applied across. Then you can see people really working across the silos, working across collaboratively to achieve that common goals.
Mm.
Now, okay, let me go to the next area of discussions about here about adoption and application of one specific CX strategy that you are most interested in or you have been working on in the past. Now, focusing on the customer journey map, allowing businesses to deep dive into potential opportunities and gaps, and that the customers experiencing good feedback or good experience with with the brands. Who would like to go on that? One specific example of a CX strategy that you're interested in.
Okay, I'll go. Believe it or not, 80% of brands don't have a customer loyalty program, and this is such an oversight. And also, I think now there's more demand for a more authentic way to build trust, because trust is the currency of the 21st century. So to give you an example, the top 100 most followed accounts on LinkedIn, 80% of them were companies about a decade ago. And today it's now flipped. Actually, individuals dominate the most followed accounts on LinkedIn. And so it's harder for customers now to be loyal to a brand, right? Shoppers can't feel emotionally connected to a brand, and the chances of repeat purchases are reduced. And given the rise of the gig economy, the transient workforce, it's even more challenging to achieve consistency of customer service levels. And so my point is that for customers to keep doing business with you, to start doing business with you, that is only the starting point. And I'll give you a personal example too. I've been an Optus customer for nearly a decade, and I switched last month to a competitor because they not only could they not offer me a better deal, they didn't even attempt to. It wasn't even on the table. And so I felt after a decade of loyalty to them, it meant nothing, and I switched. And how many people are in the exact same boat? It doesn't even have to be that big of a decade is a very long time. For example, a few of my girlfriends, they're not even loyal to a hairdresser. Every 6 weeks they shop around, right? And you think about all these companies, all these customers have the exact same thing. It's like, I need to see something. I need to see my service being rewarded in some shape or form. And it's a pet bugbear of mine to see there's always kind of new offers for new customers. It's like, well, what about the old ones? Like, you feel like you're being ignored. So that's something that I'm very interested in, and I think more companies should embrace.
And it's just so surprising because we know that the cost of customer acquisition for an existing customer is a lot less than a new customer. Right? No, they know you, they know the brand, they have experienced you. To keep them loyal and happy, it's going to take a lot less than impressing and trying to start from ground zero for new customers. But yet, a lot of brands are not spending that right focus and attention. That's just interesting. That's why CX is far more important right now on the front of all the urgencies and imperatives for the management. Ying, what do you think?
Yeah, I think loyalty definitely is one area. I think another area in same thing but different vein is then personalization, right? So if we know that Friska has been so loyal to Optus, I would when she calls me and I answer the phone, I wouldn't say, "Hi customer, can I have your name?" I would say, "Hi Friska, how are you today, right? So I think that capability, using technology and data capabilities to personalize the experience probably will be the next step to capturing that loyalty. And you don't, I don't know, maybe the reason why there aren't more loyalty programs is that there seems to be a dollar value, like, you know, you have to come up with the currency, you have to come up with, you know, the how you're going to exchange your currency for rewards, etc., as a very classic loyalty play, right? But I think for personalization, then what can you do is essentially, once you get the certain things right, there isn't actually an upfront cost to it, recurring upfront cost. So for example, one of the great brands of personalization is SIA. And I miss flying with them, because whenever I fly with them, they kind of remember, okay, I know this is your favorite drink and this is where you would like to sit. You prefer like a window seat versus an aisle seat. And I think that's really great service. And I think some of the brands that are learning that, and I can see that more on a daily basis, like for example, for Grab, right? Grab knows if I'm opening my app at 9 a.m. it's like because I want to get a ride to work. If I open it at noon, it's because I want to order food. If I open it on a Saturday evening, it's because I want to head out. So I think small things like this to really help both the customer feel like you care about them, and also then create that reward and that ease of use, which would then again translate into better business for the company. I think that's a big one to watch.
And you see, companies are sitting on so much data of the customers, and they're just not using it. Something that, like, being just, yeah, like your example, I would even do further. I'll say, "Hi, Friska." I'll call Friska before she renews. "Hi, Friska. Thank you for being with us for 10 years. Well, we have this promotion. We'd like to reward you with this blah blah blah, then the 50% discount and things like that." So, I mean, how would Friska feel? How would you feel, Friska, if this really happened?
Yeah, very loyal. I wouldn't be shopping around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, my point about there's sitting on so much data, you just got to use the data in the right way, in the right sense, and build the customer journey into it, applying data to fill the gaps, and then out you go. You get an execution plan, a plan where the call center can just pick up the phone. You know, they can even read a script, but then they go call about to renew with customers, and to obtain their renewal and more loyal customers.
It should be like, for example, car insurance, right? In Australia, every year you don't have an accident, you're rewarded. You get a further discount on your premium, a further discount on premium. So many companies could adopt that same approach to increase customer loyalty. Like you said, Francis, they're sitting on a gold mine of data. They're just not leveraging it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in view of time, I have a final question for both of you, so that we have some time for the audience. One is that, what would you like to leave the audience with? Perhaps a piece of advice or a sharing of your observation about how businesses will execute their CX plan in terms of picking up new CX initiatives as a start. What would you advise for some companies who are thinking that, hey, look, we have been thinking about this for a while. Measurement, CX, whatever discussed are so relevant today. So where would we start? What would your advice be? Who would like to go?
I can go first. I think going back to what we talked about quite a bit in terms of the organizational structure, right? I think it's good to just start, right? And to start is kind of to decide where does CX sit. Do you want to go through the control out? You know, you start small projects within any department. I've seen CX projects done in marketing departments, in logistics departments, in commercial departments, etc. So I think a good start would be to find like a small pain point and rally different silos around it to really get a conversation going. Because one of the key things that we were talking about is what are the barriers to CX adoption, and I feel it's a little bit on the cultural side, and it's a bit about how do we even get the organization to care about it. So for people who are starting, I would say start small, and then, you know, grow from there, and then get buy-in as you go along.
For me, it would be don't blindly execute the sexiest initiative, the one with the biggest payoff. Because the most common reason why CX transformation fails is because of a lack of sponsorship. invisible leadership, and communication that's lacking of any warmth. So really take a good hard look at who's around the boardroom table and make sure that the people that need to lead it know what's involved, know what's at stake. Similar to Ying's approach, a lot of companies are actually quite conservative, and so to start small is a very good idea. Just get one team or one department to do something differently, get a pilot off the ground, get a proof of concept, execute with brutal efficiency, and then promote the hell out of it, and use the small wins to generate more momentum and whet the appetite for even bigger change. And also don't make it seem like don't try not to use the word transformation, because people get intimidated by that at the end of the day. And so, if the company is conservative, get stats and case studies on what competitors or the industry are doing. Because after all, industry standard is a standard that we all want to reach, if not exceed. And so if you paint it this way, what is actually a giant leap for that company, but in the backdrop of greater industry context, is actually looks like a small step. And that'll often reduce the fear and the intimidation of trying something new. And my last point would be, whoever is nominated to lead the CX initiative, the executive sponsor or someone on the C-suite, they really have to understand what's involved. They will have to roll their sleeves up, because changing mindsets, changing behaviors, it's not a spectator sport. You actually have to get in there. You can't delegate this to your 2IC. You have to be visible. And it's not just a matter of signing off on budget. So your words, your actions, and most importantly, what you reinforce has to align. So those are my top tips.
Thanks, ladies. I like the part about quick wins. It's important to demonstrate those small quick wins so that the skeptics and the management can be convinced. For me, one would be for those who are here who are not, let's say, the seniors management, it would be important to have them on board first, because when they understand how and what CX entails, then they can then provide the support and resources needed to execute that. Now, thank you. I have a question from the audience for both of you. The question is this. The question is around subscription-based product like Amazon Prime, Blue Apron, etc. Do you think these services will grab larger market share in the future? Any predictions around the subscription economy?
I could go first. Well, I think subscriptions, not a new thing, right? It's just what people are subscribing to are changing, right? Like 10, 20 years ago, we had no Netflix, and now we have Netflix. And yesterday, Disney Plus launched in Singapore. So that's probably a big one. I think for subscription economy, the principles of customer experience still hold, right? And it's across the whole journey. I'll give an example, and similar to Friska, what you were talking about your loyalty, right? I now subscribe to skincare, and my skincare routine is so simplified, and it comes once every 2 months. I just have to check that when's the date is coming, etc. And I am on a subscription model, but yesterday I was just curious of when my next delivery was gonna come, and I realized that the pricing that I'm paying on subscription was higher than the pricing they have that they relaunched it. So actually, if I canceled it and resubscribe, I would get it cheaper. So to me, some of those principles still apply, right? I would say my prediction for subscription economy is that we're going to see things that are highly repetitive. You would get subscriptions, launching around it. And we're going to see growth in terms of what gets subscribed to, but in terms of retention and experience, the same principles apply.
I think the subscription economy will grow just because everybody's busy and everybody wants something set and forget. I know every 2 months this will arrive, every 3 months that will arrive. So I think it's a symptom of modern day lifestyles, not necessarily a symptom of our consumption behaviors are changing. And again, that convenience needs to be offset by superior CX experience, because like you said, you just found out that you actually haven't been getting a great deal. So yeah, and the same way I cancelled that Telstra subscription. Yeah, so I think, yes, it will grow, but not to the detriment of not having quality best practice CX principles in place.
Yeah, the example that Being has mentioned is a very common one which I heard, but it's also a very horrifying and horrendous example that I've heard of, because not only you piss this customer off with that, so for me it's not the right thing to do. You actually will lose these customers forever. I've known of some subscriptions in the past that, for example, they would not advise, they would not come back to the loyal customer and say, look, we'd observe from the data that you're using this. You can actually save some money in having that kind of a portfolio. Now, the thing goes a long way, because if the customers felt that you are watching over them, you're looking after them, not only that they will buy more potentially in the future, but they also be a very good advocate for your brand. On the contrary, if you don't do that, what Being experienced, I think anyone in her shoes will get off of that brand forever. It's almost, some even would call it unethical, perhaps, if very borderline, right? So I think all this data persists and exists in the organization. They just have to make sure they use it correctly. All right, now we just have sufficient time for one last question. And on my screen, there's one. Okay, good. Let me pick this one. What is your best advice to handle negative and rude feedback being made publicly on social media? I would assume that this is an assumption that both of you are, say, you are the customer experience head of your organization. And how would you handle that? I think Being will be the first to go. This is like a bread and butter for you. not for Lazada per se. I mean, at least there'll be instances, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I think the first thing first is I would say is to come from a place of empathy, right? The reason why there's probably negative feedback or even rude feedback is that a customer has experienced something bad, so we have to first acknowledge it, right? Acknowledge that there was a problem there, and I think also put yourself in the shoes of a customer and think of a negative experience where you've experienced. And most of the times, what we have acknowledged or what we've seen is that these customers basically are really frustrated because they've tried number of avenues, and these are cases where probably a chain of things have gone wrong, and they feel like they haven't gotten a satisfactory response from us. So usually what we do is that we have a special team of agents that are dedicated to digging into this case a bit more, and they'll give a call to the affected customer in order to say, we're really sorry that this has happened. I understand that this is a problem that you have, and we are solving it for you, or we have solved it for you already, and to show that we care personally about their business and about their experience. And usually on social media, sometimes you do have your own organization account. Some of the things that I know sometimes we are guilty of this as well. I say, oh, we're looking into this, like those kind of copy and paste response. I feel that there's a lot of room to grow in that, and especially for smaller organizations, I've seen like even the CEOs come in and say that, yes, we've heard you, this is what we've done. And sometimes some of the really great rescue experiences you've seen is actually the customers point it again and say, actually, this is a great thing that they've done, and they posted something else on their experience. So that's, again, the gold standard that we aim to reach. We know that we can't do that all the time. But again, I would say start from a place of empathy and then solve the problem. That's main two pieces of feedback.
I'd echo Being's point. I'd just add, always be the bigger person, right? Adopt a mindset of curiosity, not contempt. And if they've said something rude publicly in a public forum, I would actually respond. Something not vanilla, but just to acknowledge that they've been heard. Otherwise, they will not stop. And if your response is silence, then people automatically assume the worst. So I would respond to that person, but always with professionalism, and see it as an opportunity to improve a process that you didn't know was broken, and invite that person to offer their suggestions on how to make sure it's not repeated in the future.
Yeah, those are very good strategies. In fact, this People often want to be heard and they want a response, and always respond very professionally. Be a bigger person, and sometimes you may even convert these people when they get impressed with the way you handle that crisis. They become a very loud advocate for your brand, but this time in a positive way, not in the complaints way. Now, so just a couple of thoughts to round off our discussion today is customers the loyalty from customers are challenging these days. It's no longer like in the past where people stay with the brand. The options are so many. Customers has a lot of options. The power has shifted from brands or businesses to customers. They are the one that has the power to choose and to decide where the organizations will end. So these are a couple of things, and also on the question about the subscription economy, it's not only here to stay, in my opinion. It's going to get larger and bigger because it's basically on the background of on-demand services, right? People need to just like to pay and buy on demand, not having to lock up assets and withhold a lot of resources. You only use it and pay for when you need, and that's the best for customers, in my opinion. Now, with that, I hope every one of you online, thank you for tuning in and appreciate your time for this hour. And of course, most importantly, I'd like to thank both ladies, Friska and Ying, for your precious time today, sharing your experience and your perspective. We really appreciate that. And I wish everyone a great day for the rest of the day. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.